Yeah, I know we're tight on time, so I'll.
I was gonna say, what did you guys okay being? You're kind of
Should
on
we?
that
Should
one.
we? Yeah.
Oh,
It's like the
sorry, I
high
thought
school
it was.
class.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes, we're still
Is it
doing
okay
that.
if we shift Ahmad? And, yeah, I want you guys to shift.
Okay.
It just looked weird. It looked weird.
Just tell us what you want.
Yeah.
No, you guys are fine.
Oh, just that one.
Pull that thing a little closer. The microphone.
So matches are on time, which means I have
5 minutes.
5, but I'll do 10.
Maybe he can open up.
Yeah. Why don't you kick it off, and because that way
Yeah.
we can.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'll just kick it off with saying that I'm very proud of where we are right now as an organization. 1 year into our launch with Ahmad last year, he's been on for a little bit longer than a year, but I mean, if I rewind 12 months and was able to look into the 1 year into the future and see where we are now, I'd be absolutely delighted and thrilled, which I am today. So I think we've got a lot of momentum. I think what we're doing is the right thing for the sport and for the players, and I have a lot of confidence that we're on a path to change the sport for the better.
Vasek, how would you say, like in your daily life as a player, you're kind of living the mission of the PTPA, and
Yeah.
are you out trying to recruit guys in the locker room to join? Or?
A little bit less so now than previously, but yeah, I mean, it just kind of consumes my mind. I mean, even when, yeah, it's been a lot for sure. Yeah, it's taken a lot of energy out of me the last 4 years. It's a lot better now. The last 12 months, it's like, you have a team and you have a mod there, and we have, the executive committee, and it's been a huge weight lifted off of my shoulders, but at the same time, it still does take energy away from my career. I mean, it's a conversation that I have with my coach all the time, and because he doesn't necessarily like to see that, right? But at some point, it's you have to make certain sacrifices for kind of like bigger picture stuff, right? So for me, I think especially at my age, I mean, realistically, I'm not at the stage of my career where I feel like I'm gonna have this crazy breakthrough and be top 10 in the world, and I think doing something like this is time well spent, and it's much more important than big picture than going there and trying to win more matches, even though that is still my priority, but it's a fine balance.
Are there specific things you have to do when you're interacting with the other players, or when you're going about your daily life that you wouldn't be doing otherwise? What are those?
Oh yeah, all the time. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's tennis is it's so demanding mentally and physically. I mean, obviously, physically it's a no-brainer. You see how physically demanding it is. I mean, we're on the court running side. I mean, but the mental aspect is something that it's hard to understand unless you live through it, because you're traveling every week of the year. It's a one-on-one competition. You're in a constant state of, your baseline level of stress is elevated all the time because you're in this environment where, so how my situation is different. The fact that I'm trying to recruit and trying to spread the word of the PTPA is the fact that I have to stick around longer on site. I do that kind of stuff. I'm in the locker room having conversations where a few years back, or especially now as you get older, like, I don't want to be on site.
Yeah.
Because it takes energy from you. Like, it takes energy. So yeah, and even just the fact, like, you have, in fact, when it's on your mind, oh, I have to talk to this person about this, like, that all takes energy, right? It's hard to disconnect. So in an ideal world, I would obviously like to disconnect from my sport completely when I'm done my 7-8 hours of the day.
Sure.
But in reality is I kind of keep going, nonstop. So
I can probably count on one hand the number of days in the last year and a half that I haven't communicated with Vasek about something. We had a player party last night, so inviting players to that, different issues, all the things that you see listed on the kind of 1 year summary there. Like, those are all things that Vasek touched and either initiated or gave feedback on or approval on in some way, shape, or form. Every single one of those things.
I'd like to add that it gives me a lot of joy too. Like honestly, it gives me positive energy. There's times where it does take energy away, but especially seeing the progress and like where we are now, it's especially these days, it's giving me more of a boost. And when players have an issue and they text me like that, it just shows that we're getting somewhere. That we're reaching a point where this will really be a big success because that's that's kind of why this whole thing started, right? Is that players have a somewhere to go, and now they have a whole team, and so yeah.
Has assuming this role helped or hurt or neither conversations with potential corporate partners? Do you get a sense that from outside of the PTPA work that it's changed the way that your business opportunities have?
You mean personally?
Yeah.
No, not with. Let me think about that. Not yet.
Okay.
Not with regards to the PTP. Not with this. I mean, I'm pretty entrepreneurial. I mean, in general, and I guess I'm one of the players that does have a few things going on off the court. It's not necessarily related to tennis, so but not necessarily PTP related that I can think of at this moment.
Are there certain players you're trying to recruit? Like, is Carlos going to join, or has he joined?
Well, I think we'll keep specific names confidential, but we do have a majority of the top 100 already. We have well over 300 players that are joined on both the men's and the women's side. So, and like I said, I think we're way ahead of our projections or where we want it to be at this stage. So, very positive. And things don't happen overnight, but I think we're definitely moving faster than we expected or
yeah, and importantly, the way we view it is our advocacy work. We're advocating for the top players, 250 men, 250 women, 100 doubles on the men's side and the women's side, regardless, right? So if we negotiated an increase in the pension or a contribution from the Grand Slams, we're not going to sit there and say, did this person sign? It's applicable to everybody. It was a little bit like whether you voted for your congressman or woman or not, right? Like if they pass a law or the AARP, if you're a certain age, which I think I now qualify for, and they negotiate a prescription drug benefit, right? Whether or not I'm a member of the AARP, that benefits me. So a big part of the work that we're trying to do is irrespective of somebody being now some of the things we're doing on the commercial side, trading cards, that's where we've signed up over 300 men and women in really since the end of the Australian Open. So it's been a short period of time.
For both of you, that there have been a lot of talks about private equity money coming into tennis, either hosting events or something bigger. Has the potential to increase the pool of money in tennis. Also comes with some potential baggage. I'm curious if you guys have thought about it, what you think about those opportunities for tennis, for the ATP, for WTA, whatever it is.
I'll go first and let you think about it. But I think that's good. I think just like daylight is a good disinfectant. I think having more commercial interest. Now there is what structure, right? There's a lot of questions that come with that, and maybe other issues that get set up. But as a general matter, one of the issues we've seen in tennis is it hasn't had the kind of commercialization that we've seen in the NBA, in the NFL, the MLB, global soccer, and the players want that, right? I mean, this is really a top 5 global sport. It's not collectively, and I'm not pointing any fingers, it's just a structural thing. It doesn't show. And I would hope that maybe an influx of money, capital, smart capital that are doing things in other sports can bring some best practices from other sports. I mean, that's frankly part of what we've talked about over the last year and a half.
When the ATP just announced these minimum salaries, what did you guys think of that? And were you influential in that happening? Or, excuse my ignorance.
No, it's not ignorance, but they didn't call it minimum salaries for minimum. No, it's a financial, what is it? Financial security program. Yeah. And remember, part of the structure of tennis, because minimum salary applies to employees, and the tennis players aren't employees. They're independent contractors. That's why they pay their own travel, all of the things that they have, coaches, all that stuff, physios. And so that, it's a good thing. It's better than nothing. I think how good, we're trying to, suss that out. I think our pressure really for the last 4 years, because it was one of the first things that Novak talked about in 2020, absolutely led to this, and other attempts at improvements. How substantive it is, I think we're trying to really assess that and hold people accountable to it.
Guys, I gotta go. I'm very sorry. I got a match in 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So.
Good luck, man.
Thanks, guys.
All right, I'll call you later.
Thanks.
We're gonna have Novak in the room in about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Hopefully 5.
Yeah. But we can keep going into
For sure. If anybody else has questions for Ahmad, if not, we can take a little break and we'll
yeah. See you guys.
Do you think tennis is potentially vulnerable to something like Liv? Just someone coming in with a huge bucket of money and getting half of the biggest names in the world to do something totally different?
Yes, but it's not us, right? Like we're not trying to do that.
Of course, yeah.
But well, not of course. I think one of the things we've heard over the last year is the PTPA is trying to start, a breakaway tour,
Yeah.
and it seems I can't apparently rebut that enough. But to your question, yeah, absolutely, because that same capital, even in golf, it didn't start out with let's just create a rival, right? I think that's probably why you've seen some of the willingness over the last few months to look at not only capital but certain sources of capital is prompted by watching what has happened in golf, both Live, however many years ago, but also the last couple months in particular, with where things are now in golf. But yeah, I mean it's an individual sport like golf. There's really a handful of 50, 100 men, 50, 100 women that can move the needle, and so and part of the reason the PTPA exists is prize money and the economics aren't where they should be. So that is, and I said this a year ago, that is a combustible environment in any business,
Yeah.
right? And so you could either kind of try to innovate that as a from within, or have somebody come in and totally try to disrupt you from outside.
Something else we've seen in golf recently with what the Turner has done with the match. These
Yeah.
kind of not officially sanctioned, but money-making opportunities for select stars. Why do you think it is that we haven't seen?
There's some of that in tennis. There's some
There is.
exhibitions. Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna get myself into trouble, but Patrick Mouratoglou. Yeah, did I say it right? Okay. He has a thing called Universal Tennis Showdown, I think, is UTS. They just did the most recent iteration in LA in the last few months. And that type of thing has actually, there's an appetite for it, right? Both from a ticket standpoint, TV. I think there can and should be more, but part of the problem with that, you have a lot of that in December, exhibition kind of season. There's not a real off season in tennis, right? And so we pulled some data. There was a guy last year, we were wondering like who played the most tournaments last year. Somebody played like 40 events last year, and some of them are 2-week events. So the guy is basically playing tennis for 50 weeks of the year, because that's how many weeks there are things. And so that's not healthy either. And it really does make it hard for players from a health standpoint, the mental aspect that Vasek hit, and other aspects.
Was he a top 100 player? Anyone?
Top 100, yeah, but on the lower end. Yeah, because a top 25 guy doesn't need to do that.
Can you say who it is?
No, I don't even know. I don't remember, but we can find it. Yeah.
You mentioned prize money. They have the signs up everywhere. They're celebrating their
Yeah.
50th anniversary. Where are you guys on prize money? Would you like to see the same in all tournaments, not just Grand Slams? Are you happy with the way things are going in that regard?
We'd like to see it go up overall. I think there is a commitment to equal prize money across the board, not just at the Grand Slam level, particularly because at the non-Grand Slam events, the men and the women are playing the same length, right? It's best of 3. And there is, I guess, officially a commitment to that from the tours, but it's kind of staggered in a way that I don't know is optimal, right? I mean, I think there's some level by 2027 and the rest by 2023. I'm sorry, 2033. And I told my wife by 2033 I'm going to be like, in shape and my hair won't be gray anymore, and like so. 10 years is a long time in any business, in any sport. I think we shouldn't. It's good to be aspirational, but I think those kind of time horizons are a little tricky. And by the way, that was stated before the ATP rolled out baseline, so that's actually a moving target, right? And you'll hear it from Vasek, you hear it from Novak. Like the men aren't exactly thrilled with where they are. So when you peg yourself to where the men are, I mean that seems a bit of an artificial target. It should be, well, what should the athletes be getting, as from the sport? What should the sport be generating, and then how do you share in that?
I mean, it does seem crazy that like Coco and Novak both just played a 2 out of 3 event, and she got half as much prize money as him. Right?
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
And I think that close to that percentage was exactly what prompted 50 years ago Billie Jean King to, right? I mean, it's literally she won half and said it should be the same.
I'm curious you spent a long time working with NFL athletes. Being a year into working with tennis athletes, what stands out as surprise differences?
I could really get myself into it.
But yeah,
I've had to lose some weight to not no. So they all start much earlier in tennis. I mean, because meaning where they're not in school or they're not a part of, because almost every NFL player went at least 3 years in college, if not 4.
Yeah.
And they're, I mean, I know a lot of players who, if their team played in the UK for one of those London games, they didn't have a passport until they went to the UK. And obviously that's not like possible in tennis. So that's a big difference. And that whole, there's a player like lounge area at every tournament. You go in there and it's like a mini United Nations, right? For better or for worse, for better and for worse. So that's a huge difference, because you pretty much have, it's like a novelty to have a foreign player in the NFL, not as much in the NBA and others. Hey, hey,
Hello, everyone.
you can be Vasek. Yeah, how you doing?
Hi.
Yes, yes.
Is he
He left. He just left because
Oh,
he
he
has to
just-
go to
oh,
his
he was
match. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. He knows his name.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Forgot where we were. But... Now you can ask the hard questions.
Please.
I guess Novak, we were just talking about
Yeah.
the ATP guaranteeing some minimum
Yeah.
salaries or whatever. What are your thoughts on that? And do you feel the PTPA helped kind of push them to that?
Well, I think it's a step in the right direction, no doubt. I definitely salute that kind of announcement and decision from ATP. And I think the bottom line is that we all involved in the tennis ecosystem have to try to collectively create an environment in the future where more tennis players, both male and female, will be able to live from the sport. So that's that's in the core of PTPA. That's our biggest mission. And if we contributed to this announcement of ATP, great. I think we did. We were talking about this actually 3 years ago, Vasek and I, when we founded the PTPA in 2020 US Open. And I remember having lots of press conferences about that and answering questions of you guys on, what is the mission and the vision, and trying to raise the awareness of how little the number of players who live from this sport is globally. And we have, I think, is it 450 players maybe globally, male, female, singles, doubles, that live from tennis. That is, by some statistics, the third most watched sport and popular sport in the planet, followed by 1.3 or 4 billion people on the planet. So that's for me concerning. There's a very long way to go, but it is a step in the right direction.
We were just talking before you came in about live golf, and I got a lot of thoughts, but I'm curious to hear yours. How vulnerable do you think tennis is to a structure like that? Someone coming in and offering life-changing money to a group of some of the best tennis players in the world, and valuable you think it might be for some of those guys?
Well, I wouldn't say tennis is vulnerable. I think, well, at least my mentality is always trying to negotiate from position of strength rather than position of weakness. And I think our advantage is, as tennis collectively, is that we are a sport that is very traditional, very historic sport. 4 Grand Slams that are 4 pillars of our sport have been there for 125 plus years. And we must not forget that when we talk to anybody. You know, I think the problem that we have, both on men and women's side in tennis in the governance, is that we're too fragmented. And that, you know, the fact that I mean, that both in ATP and WTA governance, you have 50% of, you know, ATP and WTA belongs to players and 50% to the tournaments. And in most of the cases, you're always going to have a conflict of interest. So if we look back at when, you know, when the tours, you know, merged, I mean, to create an ATP tour, for example, which was, what was it, 1990, you know, I understand the idea of us being together and collectively bargaining and working on improving the value and increasing the value and improving our sport. But in essence, if you actually go to the very structure and the system that is in place, I was part of the council and president of the council for 6-7 years, so I understand, you know, how things work. Players get the shorter end of the stick 90+% of the time. So why? It's just because the system is structured and founded in such a way which doesn't allow, you know, players to actually have a decision-making role. We do have our player board representatives that are, you know, 3, and then you have 3 from the tournament side, and then you have, you know, CEO or the president that breaks the even vote. But in many of the cases, when you want to make a significant difference, you have to have a supermajority, and most of the times that's not going to happen because the two sides have a just different interest. So that is why, you know, PTPA needs to exist and needs to be there for players, because it's just representing and having 100% of the players' interest at its core. You know, I know that for the last 3 years, you know, ATP and WTA, particularly, and some other, you know, governing bodies in our sport have not been really supportive of PTPA, or I would say have been pretty much ignoring PTPA. But we are there, and we are getting stronger and stronger day by day, gaining more trust and more support from the players. Players recognizing the importance of PTPA as an organization for them and representing their rights. Because in the end of the day, you know, we are the only association in our sport that really has only 100% interest of players. All the other associations don't have that. So that's what we've been trying to talk about, I think, and really bring the light to that fact and to that issue, because I see it as an issue. I was in the council. I understand, you know, that players, you know, who are coming and going to the council, that's basically the only vehicle or the only platform where you could try to contribute to some positive change for players. But when you're actually spending more time in the tennis politics, you understand how system actually fails players. And I understand the enthusiasm and excitement of players that want to be in the council. And as I said, I was there. But then, you know, in the end of the day, your primary job is to hit the tennis ball and think about your body and how you can perform your best. Whereas all the other stakeholders are actually primarily thinking about how to, you know, work on the tennis politics and tennis business. So that's why it was one of actually reasons why we are, as players, I think, not in an ideal position. But I think the more we are active as an association for players, the more of this kind of announcements as the last one of ATP will come out, hopefully. And I think ultimately, we want to have a seat on a table, decision-making table. I think that's inevitable. It's going to happen sooner or later. How long it will take, we don't know. It just depends how quickly they will accept us or embrace us, or how fast they were willing to speak to us and work with us.
That's true on the women's side too. So John Isner, Vasek, and Novak all served on the player council of the ATP. Bethany Maddox-Sands also served on the player council of the WTA. And I think that's a really important point, that, these are players who really tried to affect change from within the existing system. And what they realized was the system is not structured properly, and it's not structured the way other truly global sports, soccer, basketball, baseball, none of those sports are structured in that way. And so there's a reason why they haven't had the same gains that those other athletes have had.
Shifting gears a little, we were talking to Vasek earlier about the U.S. Open prize money payouts, and specifically how during COVID the winner's prize got cut by quite a bit, while the qualifiers and early rounds were increased by a lot, and that seems to have shifted this year, where there was a big increase in the winner's prize and not as much for the earlier rounds. So what are your thoughts on sort of the differing changes every year, and what would you like to see in terms of the different levels?
Yeah. Well, I think it was very positive that we saw that kind of an increase of the early rounds and qualifying rounds during COVID, because players who are lower ranked logically are struggling the most, and more than us top players. I personally am not, part of PTPA. I'm not here sitting with you because I want more money for myself. It's not the case. I'm fine for this life and many other lives. But I definitely want to see a change at the base level, because 150th player on the planet struggles, and often has to travel without coach, and people don't realize how expensive this sport is. I think they really don't realize, because professional tour, men and women tour, demands constant travels. And obviously in the last few years, because of COVID, because of many different things, the prices of airplane tickets, accommodations, all these different things has increased, maybe even 2-3 folds, so that affects directly the budget of those players that are playing on a challenger level, or trying to make it to a 250 category, trying to make it to top 100 and eventually get their spot in a Grand Slam main draw guaranteed, because that's the players who are lower ranked and who are able to make a cut for Grand Slams and be able to play 4 main draws in a year makes a significant difference, because Grand Slams are paying the most, and they are earning the most in our sport. And when it comes to distribution this year, comparing to COVID and how it should be done, that's something that needs to be discussed on the table, because I still feel, because of the reasons that I stated before, we don't as players have the best possible representation on those negotiations tables, and we need to try to make that better and make our position stronger, so that we can fight for more prize money, especially the early rounds.
In a non-financial question, some of the women players were upset at the earlier Grand Slams that maybe they were getting booed because of the non-handshake thing, and they were saying the tournament referee should say there's not going to be a handshake at the end of this match. You ever talk to players about that, about what the tour should do? Should someone announce what's going to happen to protect the players so they don't get booed for a handshake that they won't
Yeah.
do?
Yeah, I've followed, what was happening, and I think that it's fair to say that in order to protect players, it would be best if there is an announcement. So I think that a lot of the uncomfortable situations could be prevented. it's a very sensitive topic. It's a very sensitive thing for both sides, and I understand, and yeah, I guess in these kind of circumstances, the respective tour managers should probably communicate better with players and understand that there might be a situation where or circumstances where players would not shake hands, and then they should try to do something about it to protect the players. But yeah, but again, crowd's reaction differs, from country to country, so you can't really affect whether you're going to get booed or not. Trust me, I know.
But we did see that in DC, the City Open this year. They made that announcement, and but we did talk to several WTA players about that issue. They reached out to us to try to push for that. And one of the things we talked about was it took until August of 2023, right, for that announcement to be made, and I don't know that it's consistently made everywhere. Yet the players who have been dealing with that issue have been dealing with it since for a year and a half, and I think that's another example of not really being in touch with the player concerns and the things that maybe are important to them, and not having a mechanism there to actually it's not that hard to to do that, and they ended up doing it.
Novak, you and Vasek are obviously in very different situations as players. How would you kind of describe your relationship and what you've been able to accomplish together? He was saying it's hard for him he wants to leave tennis when the day's over, but he has to constantly get texts and emails and deal with issues.
I'm very grateful to Vasek for his efforts. Amazing guy. He genuinely cares a lot about PTPA, about this mission of uniting players. And he has done that for the last 5 years, constantly. So he deserves tremendous credit for the energy and the time that he has put into it. And, we're friends, and of course we talk about, a lot of things, and privately, he tells me that it's difficult. I know how difficult it is because, I'm in a similar situation in terms of competing, in the professional tennis, and then still on the side trying to lobby with players and trying to kind of present PTPA and why they should join and embark on this journey. And it's much easier said than done. I mean, we know these players, we're with them, obviously sharing the locker room, but when you have to sit down with them and actually talk about some serious topics and get their attention, it becomes a little bit of a hustle.
Yeah.
And a challenge that it's very difficult to overcome. Not many players are very, can say, responsive with the emails and messages, especially during the tournament. So that makes it challenging, because in the end of the day, that's what I mentioned before. This is not our primary, not even maybe even secondary thing. So that's why you have to kind of maybe fight through layers of agencies, tour managers or whatever, coaching team to get to the player. Sometimes we don't even manage to get to the player. But it's okay. You know what I mean? It just it would make our life easier if, of course, there would be more support from the tennis ecosystem and understanding of what PTPA stands for, and that it just needs to coexist with everyone else. But because that's not the case currently, it's better than it was 3 years ago, no doubt, but it's still currently not ideal position for us, so we have to kind of fight against the wind.
Do you try to pull Carlos aside or any of the top players aside? And
Yeah, I've done that. I haven't done with Carlos yet, but I've been planning to. When we've been facing each other too much on the court, we get a chance to relax a little bit. We did have a kind of a funny little chat after the finals in Cincinnati, and we agreed that we're going to play a golf round together eventually. So maybe that's going to be an ideal few hours for me to spend with him and have a little chat. Yeah, the top players, with top players is toughest because you can imagine there's more layers to them than any other lower ranked player, and then they feel they have a lot to lose, which is really what we've been trying to explain, that's not the case. Players really have more to gain, so nothing will change in terms of their legal protection of being part of the tour, doing everything that they've done so far, except being part of the PTPA, giving their signature, their name, which adds a lot of weight, positive weight to PTPA as an association. When you have the more top players you have, that's how it works.
Yeah.
The better you're going to be off in the eyes of the public. Yeah. Thank you.
You can take him to golf, right?
Sasha Zverev played with him a few weeks ago, and he told me we have a good chance against him in golf. Nice.
Other questions?
With the New Jersey thing, just to follow up from before, is there any good stories you got about New Jersey for the New Jersey?
For the New Jersey newspaper. I went to Tenafly, New Jersey, a few times. Had a haircut there. I can't remember the name of the hair salon. I would, very nice people.
You ever go out to eat?
Very easygoing. I would normally stay at home. Yeah, stay at home. If I go out to eat, it would be in the city. But Jersey is very nice, very much more quiet, but so in a great proximity to the city and also to the Flushing Meadows here. So, and of course, Gordon, who's a friend of mine, is my best friend here in America for the last 15 years, and I've been I've been kindly always invited from him to stay at his place. His son Zenny, he's now 14. He's playing as well, so my kids are friends with his children as well, and it's a great way for me to to spend some quality time with my friends and family and kind of recharge for the tough battles here in the Open.
You able to practice there? He's got practice.
Yeah, he's got practice. He's got actually 3 surfaces there. He's got indoor, he's got outdoor hard, he's got clay, green clay, red clay. He's got even grass. He's got a lot of things going on there. It's like all 4 slams in one place. He's amazing.
So you just practice on the hard court when you're there? Or?
I get to hit on the grass a little bit, just to remind myself how it feels like. All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.